Just one at a time.
Thank you, Senator Corbin. So, S631, AB 21, and then AB 22. Shall we do 21 first? So, staff, if you could please explain 631-ABE-21.
Brian Gwynn, Legislative Analysis. This amendment would remove the prohibition on, or the requirement that, the prohibition on women participating in men's sports.
Thank you. Senator Corbin, do you have any further explanation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is a provision we agreed to remove. We didn't really intend for that to be in the bill to start with, and we're very familiar that there are females who participate in sports such as football, and we have no problem with that. So that's the purpose of this amendment, is to remove that language. So appreciate a favorable vote.
Thank you, Senator Corbin. Do we have any questions or discussion from the committee on this amendment only?
I have a question.
Senator Marcus.
I appreciate the amendment. I guess I'd just like to hear from the amendment sponsor, the bill sponsor, why it's so easy or self-explanatory to have girls play on boys' teams, but not the reverse. Could you flesh that out for us?
Happy to.
Senator Sawyer.
Yeah, happy to. So really the intent is to have two leagues in North Carolina. One is pure women's sports league. The other is a co-ed league. As a girl who's played in co-ed sports, there are different rules and things that happen on that field when a man plays against a female. A female fully understands when she walks on the field playing against other men and takes those risks into her hands. When a woman walks onto the field and she plays against other women, she doesn't expect to be outnumbered or outgunned by someone who's a biological man. So the intent of this language was not to exclude women from knowingly going into a league with people who are superior athletically. And if she wants to play golf on a men's team, or play baseball on a baseball team like I did, or play softball on a men's team like I have, then she understands the risks there. But if a biological man wants to walk onto a all-women's team, then that is not allowed.
Thank you, Senator Sawyer. Are there any more questions about this amendment? Seeing none, Senator McInnes has made a motion to adopt the amendment. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. So we've that takes care of that amendment. We have a second amendment. Senator Corbin is recognized to explain the amendment.
Yes, ma'am. Again, this one is pretty much purely technical in nature. I'll have staff, Brian Gwynn, to explain it.
Thank you. Mr. Gwynn, would you please explain the amendment?
Brian Gwynn, Legislative Analysis. So this amendment is technical in nature. Among the technical changes, including changing a reference to athletic association to the new statutory term administering organization, and also changing the statutes that are modified for applying the bill to private schools. The application to private schools exists in the first edition. This amendment would just change which statutes would be amended in order to effectuate the intent of the bill.
Thank you. Do you have any more explanation of the amendment? Seeing none, are there any comments or questions from the committee regarding this amendment only? Seeing none, Senator Sanderson has made a motion for approval of the amendment. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? So that amendment is adopted. So the bill is back before us as amended. Senator Corbin to explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just point out the title of this bill again. It's Fairness in Women's Sports. That's what this bill is about. It's common sense legislation. Let me state a couple of things that we had coming into this. Athletics play an important role to many of our students, parents, and families. Sports help students learn much beyond traditional bookwork. At the time put into sports, practice off and on the field, tournaments, team building is immeasurable. At the heart of it all, though, is competition. Like so many parents whose kids are student athletes, we want to make sure that fair competition is maintained. So I want you to think about this. We would not put a JV team up against a varsity team. We don't have men's teams play women's teams. It'd be unfair to our students if we ignored some of the biological realities that have measurable impact on outcomes in sports. I'd like to defer to Senator Sawyer. She has really carried the water on this and done a great job putting this bill together, and glad to have her working with me on this. Senator Sawyer.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, committee. Thank you, chairs, for allowing this bill to be heard today. And I look forward for a lively discussion, one that's been had on a national scale, but one that I think that we've missed a big part of this discussion. So, as a young female athlete myself, I remember waking up on the day of a major championship having severe menstrual cramps. I remember when I had been given a pair of white sliding pants and cringed. I remember when I missed the last half of a championship basketball game because I had to run to the restroom. We haven't talked about how hard it is for a female athlete to perform just and get out on the floor and play through biological issues that we all face as females. So now, when we do those things as female athletes, then we have someone whose feelings are hurt that doesn't have to go through those things, who are naturally stronger than us. So what you're telling me is that as a female athlete, not only do I have to deal with those embarrassing moments and figuring out my body and learning how to play this sport, I have to work out twice as hard and run twice as longer and be twice as strong as someone who physically just wakes up and feels like they can come in and take away my championship that I worked my entire life for, take away my ribbon that I have been working for, and take away my dignity that sports has given me. This bill is not about being anti-trans. This bill is about being pro-woman. And if you're a woman, I ask you to stand with me and protect our sports that we have fought so hard for the past decades to make sure that we can be recognized and play in a fair atmosphere. And I want you to vote with me today so that we can protect these young women as they too pursue the same dreams that I was given as a young female athlete. And Madam Chair, I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Senator Sawyer and Senator Corbin. Questions from the committee? Senator Marcus.
First, I'd like to respond a little bit to this idea that male athletes don't fake being transgender in order to get some sort of advantage by playing on female teams. That just doesn't happen. There's no nefarious plot by non-trans athletes to give themselves an advantage in competition by claiming or saying their feelings are hurt, and that's not what this is about. So what we're talking about is the very small number of young people here in North Carolina who are really struggling with their identity, who are trying to find their path in life, protect their mental health, their physical health, who want to join a team, who want to play sports, don't fit the mold, maybe like the bill sponsor herself, who might make other people a little uncomfortable by wanting to play on a team that doesn't match their sex. It might make other people a little uncomfortable in some cases, but it's worth it, just like it was worth it for the bill sponsor. And this bill is a blanket rule that we don't need here in North Carolina. There's so few transgender athletes. I think what I read is 15 maybe at the peak. I don't even think that means 15 currently in our high schools. And we've been handling it on a case-by-case basis. So my first question, without incident, other than I understand there was one report at a volleyball game where it's unclear if the athlete was a trans athlete, and if that was the reason why injuries happen. I will point out injuries happen in sports all the time. We don't need legislation to try to protect everyone in every case. And so I guess my first question is, especially when we know a bill like this violates Title IX protections under the federal law, why do we need this law? we have other priorities. I think gun violence in our schools is much more top of mind, teacher shortage, other things. What about our current system feels so wrong that we want to spend this body's time with a blanket bill like this to micromanage in such a small case? That's my first question.
Thank you. Madam Chair.
Senator Sawyer.
Madam Chair, yeah. So uncomfortable. I guess the young woman in Cherokee County who's still uncomfortable today from her neck injuries after a transgender male slammed her to the ground with a volleyball. Uncomfortable? Yeah, I call that uncomfortable. 1 out of 15 transgender athletes, and we've had 1 injury. Those odds are pretty high. I've played against men in men's sports knowingly that they were men, and that was a choice I made, knowing that the risks were higher because they were stronger. That is something that I made that choice. Now, as a young female athlete, and if I'm walking onto the softball field and I have a man who can hit the ball 3 times as hard and I'm playing third base and he takes me out from no fault of my own, that is something that is uncomfortable. If we want to talk about uncomfortable, let's talk about how young women's lives are put in danger by having to play a sport they love by someone who's 3 times as strong as them. That's uncomfortable. So we're not going to agree on that. The small amount of incidents, I say 15, that's too high. I mean, quite frankly, again, we're not going to agree on that either. 15 people who are playing in women's sports, that number is too high. And thirdly, this isn't an issue, this is a small issue. No, this is a big issue. These are biological men who can take sports away from women. These are biological men who can take away athletic scholarships from women. These are biological men who can take away a championship from women. So I am pro-woman, and for me, 15 is too many. And for me, this committee's time is well-deserved on this very important bill. So we're just not going to agree, Senator Marcus.
Senator Marcus, do you have a follow-up?
I have one more question if I can. I will agree we're not going to be able to agree on that. I'm pointing out also that this isn't men for the most part. These are children. So we just want to have an accurate idea in our head about who we're talking about. This goes down to middle school sports. So, but my other question is, your bill seems to have a very binary idea about sex. You're either a boy or you're a girl. So my question is, what would your bill do for an intersex athlete?
Senator Sawyer.
You mean for the 0.0001% of cases that are biologically intersect and not someone who's just identifying as being intersect? So the hypothetical situation of the very, very minute situation of that actually happening? I mean, isn't that what an appeals board is for, that we set up with the High School Athletic Association? So there's already structure around that we've handled in last session.
If I could respond to that.
Actually, Senator Marcus, we're going to
She asked me a question. Can I respond to the?
We're going to pause on that because we have the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Catherine Truitt, is here, and we're going to invite Superintendent Truitt to the podium, and then we have other people who have questions and concerns as well. So, and we're limited in our amount of time.
Well, we're
So
waiting
we'll
for
come-
her. I'll say intersex people make up 1.7% of the population.
Thank you.
Superintendent Truitt, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chair Gailey, and thank you all for allowing me to spend a few minutes with you this morning. I believe in protecting the integrity of women's sports. I am a mom to 2 daughters, one of whom is currently a college athlete and one of whom is currently a high school athlete. In fact, my older daughter is, who is in college, was the 2020 statewide indoor pole vault champion for this state. If we are truly to maintain a level playing field in women's sports, biological sex must supersede gender preference. There are inherent and intrinsic biological differences between men and women that impact, and boys and girls, that impact athletic performance. These differences can result in variations across strength, speed, and endurance. These factors undoubtedly impact someone's success and outcomes in a sport. Studies show that there is an average of 10 to 12% performance gap between elite males and elite females, which is almost entirely attributable to the presence of testosterone. This is one biological factor that is an inherent benefit. Testosterone affects everything from muscle size, the size of the heart, the amount of fat, the higher red blood count. Testosterone production is fundamental to the discrepancies in athletic performance typical of women and men. Biological differences explain why we needed Title IX protections in the first place. And this is why Title IX is so important. We can respect individual gender preferences without reconstructing Title IX to inherently disadvantage women. But biological sex must be the basis for sporting events for our high school athletes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. And thank you for coming today. Senator Marcus, I'll come back to you for one more comment. Because we are limited on time. And I know the other members of the committee have.
I appreciate that. I want to give everyone their time, but I felt like she specifically was asking me a question.
Go
So
ahead.
intersex people, just for the record, I looked it up, make up 1.7% of the population. So it's not 0.001, whatever she said. It's 1.7% of the population. That's bodies who just don't, they're born that way. These are people who exist, who have a right to play sports. And I think a bill like this just ignores that those people even exist by suggesting you have to be one or the other. There are chromosomes that don't match reproductive body parts. That is a fact. And a bill like this just, I don't know, attempts to erase those people as well. So it's
Chair.
problematic for that reason.
Senator Sawyer.
Madam Chair, thank you so much. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability of the Google when I'm sitting up here, so I appreciate you fact-checking me there. But there is an appeals process set up by the High School Athletic Association. So by no means does this bill deny this person to be able to go in and play a sports team, whichever they choose. That there's an appeals process that they could go through. So again, we're going to disagree on that. But thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Sawyer. Senator Sawyer. Senator Newton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Sawyer, have I read through the bill and hearing that no speeches here? I have a daughter too who played sports, but you know we can all lay our stories out there as we should. This is anecdotal is important. Is there anything in this bill that prevents males, young men, boys, whatever we want to call them, who identify as females? Is there anything in the bill that keeps them from playing sports at all?
Senator Sawyer.
No, sir.
Thank
Senator
you.
Newton.
Thank you.
Senator Choudhury.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions. Senator Sawyer, so my first question is, you mentioned the appeals process to the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. You're aware that they've established rules to already address this, so I'm curious as to why we are now passing legislation given the fact that the High School Athletic Association has a set of rules and process in place to address this issue.
Senator Sawyer.
The number is 15. They made 15 wrong decisions.
Okay.
Senator Choudhury.
Follow up, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Senator Sawyer, are you aware, I mean, have you or any of the other sponsors or co-sponsors of the bill heard from the business community about whether this bill would harm our state's efforts to recruit and retain companies here in the state?
Senator Sawyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the political play you're having here.
It's
I'm
not political,
I'm
Senator
here to
Sawyer.
protect young.
Senator Sawyer's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here to protect young women, and that's what I'm here for. Thank you so much for the question.
Senator Choudhury, one last comment before we give somebody else a chance.
Senator Sawyer, are you aware that Republican governors such as that in Utah and Indiana have vetoed similar legislation?
Senator Sawyer.
Senator, I'm a North Carolina senator, and I'm dealing with North Carolina law.
Madam Chair, may I make a comment?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I would simply say that when the Republican Utah governor vetoed similar bill, he said in his veto letter that I must admit that I am not an expert on transgenderism. I struggle to understand so much of it. When in doubt, however, I always try to err on the side of kindness, mercy, and compassion and rarely has so much fear and anger been directed at so few. And I will share with you three numbers: 184,662, 15, and 56. We have 140,662 high school athletes. We have 15 transgender kids playing high school sports, and we have 56% of trans youth having attempted suicide. I think this bill traffics in fear. 15 of them to be targeted, to be clear. I think it puts our most vulnerable kids in harm. As I mentioned, I think this bill returns us back, Senator Sawyer, to the days of House Bill 2, and we don't need to go back to that. Frankly, there's a reason we're not Texas and Florida, and I don't want to be Texas and Florida when it comes to treating our most vulnerable kids and how we recruit businesses to our state.
Thank you, Senator Sawyer. Do you want to respond to that comment? Anyone else from the committee? Senator Lazara.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I find it really troublesome that we're having a difficult time in a discussion understanding biological differences between males and females as it relates to sports. We spend so much time, energy in protecting the rights of women, and here today we're arguing about that very subject and not giving the protection to young women that we all work so hard to give. I just really have a hard time understanding why. This is a clear biological difference in women's sports. We shouldn't have to justify it. We talk about a small number. Small is not a certain. Today it's 15, tomorrow could be 30, tomorrow could be 16. There's no certainty in that word. We should not be arguing about a clear biological difference in the effects of young women when they're not playing against their own biological sex. It's the protection of women. That is what we're here doing today. We're not prohibiting anyone from playing a sport. No one's prohibiting anyone from playing a sport. And so with that, Madam Chair, at the appropriate time, I will move for a favorable.
Thank you, Senator Lazara. Do the bill sponsors have any response to Senator Lazara? Seeing none, we're going to go ahead. Is anybody else on the committee who wants to be heard on this issue? Senator McInnes.
Thank you. As a former member of a local school board, I remember Title IX and as an explicit rule related only to females, related only to female sports in this arena. And I heard the comment made that it has something to do with men. Doesn't have anything to do with men. Title IX is for women and women only.
Thank you, Senator McInnes. Anybody else from the committee? Senator Sawyer.
Thank you, Senator Gately. I got a comment and then a question, if that's okay for the committee. First off, I do have the benefit of Google, Senator Sawyer, and I thought the statistics cited earlier was off. And the clinical definition of intersex is actually 0.018%. There was a discredited or a tenuous study done by somebody who's working on gender continuity that came up with a 1.7% statistic. I'll also comment that I'm frustrated to hear calls for economic boycotts in North Carolina over this legislation. Seems to be an invitation for something, which I think we all collectively saw how harmful that was previously, and I really think that's out of place in this common sense legislation. I've got a 2-year-old daughter. And growing up, I have seen the biological differences in males and females in sports. Female golfers growing up. There's a different set of tees, tennis. There's a different serving velocity, things like that. In swimming too, there's just simply biological differences that we saw in the pool. It's the ultimate meritocracy of times that you could see where somebody was clocked in and clocked out faster than one or the other. First question is, I've heard reference about Title IX. Are you aware of when the Title IX changes came into effect with regard to transgender sports athletes?
Senator Sawyer.
Thank you. I can't make, I don't remember about the transgender on Title IX at the federal level. I do know that the High School Athletic Association made that ruling October of 2019 in a closed-door session.
And follow up. are there identifiable instances here, I mean, not just here in North Carolina, but in the United States and around the world, of transgender athletes taking championships, be it in golf or swimming, where women otherwise would have had a chance to compete and win?
Senator Sawyer.
Thank you for that question. And yes, there are examples. And in fact, I believe you'll see one in the flesh tomorrow morning here. We believe NC Values is secured Riley Gaines to come and testify firsthand of what she went through, and we all publicly have seen that. It is troubling to watch a young woman's dreams be dashed in that manner, and we will hear about it firsthand.
Thank you, Senator Sawyer. We're going to go ahead and move to public comment because we have to, as I mentioned, we have another bill that needs to be heard today.
Madam Chair, I did have.
Senator Robinson, we're going to move to public comment because we have a limited amount of time and we have people who've been waiting. First, and I'm going to name the first person to come up to the microphone, and then I'm going to say the second person. If the second person that I call could stand behind that person speaking, then we can make the most of our time. So first is Sharon Sullivan, and after Sharon Sullivan, we'll hear from Daniel Parrish. So if Mr. Parrish could be ready to present. Go ahead, Ms. Sullivan.
Good morning. My name is Sharon Sullivan. I'm with North Carolina Family Policy Council. I represent them in the Government Relations Association associate position. I come before you today in support of this bill. Girls and women deserve to compete on a level playing field, and this bill will ensure just that. To pretend that there are no biological or physiological differences between boys and girls is simply ignoring science and truth. Even in middle school, young men have a physical advantage over young women before puberty begins. Alliance Defending Freedom cites research showing, and I quote, "While boys' physiological and performance advantages accelerate rapidly from the onset of puberty, significant male athletic performance advantages exist even before the developmental changes caused by male puberty have occurred." Research also shows that girls who participate in sports develop leadership, motivational skills, are better team builders, and have the ability to see projects through to completion. They often stay in school longer, enter the labor force at a higher rate, and are much more likely to land better jobs. In other words, girl athletes receive not just the benefits of sports participation, but also a return on the investment for their futures. Allowing biological males to participate in girls' sports could rob girls of these positive benefits. Without the protections provided by this bill, some women's and girls' sports will be dominated by biological male athletes and also deny women their rightful titles, records, and scholarships. A leading national policy organization has said, "Sports are competitive, and like any competition, they should be played on a fair and level playing field. There are divisions, age brackets, and weight classes for a reason. College sports are for college athletes, professional sports for pro athletes, and female sports should be for female athletes." We couldn't agree more, and we urge you to support Senate Bill 631. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Daniel Parrish is recognized to speak. After him, we'll have a Dr. Wilder.
Hello, my name's Daniel Parrish. I'm an educator. I'm also the parent of a trans kid. They're not particularly sporty. However, this issue is still really important to me. I come to education through coaching, and to me, sports coaching and teaching are really just two sides of the same coin. And really, on both sides of that coin, we all learn best through play. Play is, in fact, sport and play are internationally recognized human rights. We all have the right to meaningful play and the joy of play. In addition, I want everyone to step back and think about two things. One is, a big thing I've learned from coaching is humility. You have to know what you don't know. And to use a sports sort of jargon or term, you have to know when your defensive scheme isn't working. If you're trying to defend women's sports, this is not the right defensive scheme. What you want to do to defend and advance women's sports is to increase funding increase access to facilities. You want to make a less toxic and sexist sports culture. Those are the things that are going to get more girls and more people of all genders involved. And we want that involvement, again, because joy of play is important, the value of active bodies and healthy diet, adversity through challenges. So meaning you are trying as hard as you can, but at the end of the day, you're thinking, you know, you win some, you lose some. And I'm going to go on to the next challenge. Which brings me to just a nuts and bolts point, which is that a huge myth about trans athletes is that they just dominate competitions. You win some, you lose some. Trans athletes lose competitions all the time. Even the 3 or 4 elite trans athletes you've probably heard of in the media, they get attention when they win. They don't get attention when they lose, which is all the time. Thank you.
Dr. Wilder is recognized to be the next speaker. After him will be Mary Suma.
Good morning. My name is Dr. C.K. Rains Wilder. I'm a physician. I am board certified in family medicine. As part of my training, I am qualified to take care of children from birth until age 18. I am here today because I am deeply concerned about the proposed bill, SB 631. The content of this bill goes against the expert guidelines recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics. There is no actual evidence to support the claim that allowing transgender athletes to participate will reduce or harm participation in girls' sports. On the other hand, there is strong evidence that sports participation is an important childhood experience for all children. Team sports help all children learn teamwork, sportsmanship, self-discipline, and a sense of belonging with their peers. I am a parent, I have a daughter, and the most important reason why we sign our kids up for sports is so they can learn these important life lessons. If North Carolina bans transgender kids from participating in the sports teams of their affirmed gender, it will increase the risks to their physical and mental well-being. How so? Transgender youth already experience unsafe and unwelcoming environments, and evidence shows that discriminatory school policies only harm them further. In a survey of 28,000 transgender Americans between kindergarten and 8th grade, 54% were verbally harassed, 24% were physically assaulted, 13% were sexually assaulted, 17% left school because of maltreatment. Why on earth would anyone want to pass a law that promotes more discrimination against this already vulnerable group? I can unequivocally state that this bill will only increase the amount of mental and physical harm faced by these students. I encourage you to follow the evidence rather than act out of fear and discrimination, and keep school sports inclusive of all North Carolina students, including our transgender students. Thank you for your time.
Next recognized to speak is Mary Suma. After Ms. Suma is Russ Chambers. Hope I pronounced that first name correctly. You're recognized to speak.
Good morning. My name is Mary Suma. I'm General Counsel for North Carolina Values Coalition. I'd like to begin by thanking the sponsors, Senator Corbin, Krawick, and Sawyer. Unlike this bill, although this bill does not include colleges, it's a good first step to protecting women in sports. Unlike many countries around the world, women here in the United States enjoy the freedom to go to school, to choose a career, and to play a sport. Many women before us have fought for equal playing field in politics, in education, and in sports. This bill ensures that equality will continue in sports. This bill has been described by many as an attack on transgender athletes. It's nothing of the sort. Rather, it is a bill designed to ensure safety and fairness for women playing sports at the middle and high school levels. In American sports, we have always established categories of play to ensure these goals of fairness and safety. Wrestling is divided into weight categories. A 200-pound wrestler cannot compete against a 110-pound wrestler. Teams are divided into age categories. An 18-year-old high school male cannot compete on a team composed of 10-year-old boys. This bill is no different. To achieve these goals for women, fairness and safety, biological boys should not be allowed to play on girls' teams. They are larger, stronger, have tougher ligaments, and greater lung capacity than women. We also know that testosterone suppression drugs given for 12 months have little effect on the muscular advantage of biological men identifying as women. Allowing transgender women to participate in female sports threatens the safety of girls. In Cherokee, just this past fall, Peyton McNabb, a volleyball player for the Hiawassee Dam High School volleyball team, was hit in the face by a spike from a 6-foot male who identified as a woman. Peyton suffered neurological damage and continues to serve damage.
Next recognized to speak is Russ Chambers. I apologize if I pronounced your first name incorrectly. And following them will be Catherine Jennifer.
Hi, my name is Russ Chambers. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the Senior Regional Organizing Lead for the Human Rights Campaign, the nation's largest organization working for LGBTQ+ equality. And I'm here on behalf of HRC's 3 million members and supporters nationwide, as well as the thousands of members and supporters within North Carolina. I myself am a North Carolina resident in Senator Michael Garrett's district, SD 27, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today. We stand in opposition to this bill. Women's sports are incredibly important, but unfortunately this bill before you will not do anything to address the actual issues, such as equal pay, chronic underfunding, and abuse of athletes, as well as barriers to access that women's sports does face. Instead, what you see here is a brazen copycat attempt to write discrimination against transgender people into North Carolina law. North Carolina, of all states, should know by now that this is a losing proposition. While many states have passed laws banning transgender students from participating in sports, in recent years, many of those laws have been challenged in court. In West Virginia and Idaho, the cases that have progressed the furthest at this point, Republican-appointed judges have determined that these bills are not supported by the facts, are a display of anti-transgender discrimination by legislatures, and these bills are unconstitutional. Transgender students have been playing sports consistent with their gender for many years at all levels of skill, and problems that proponents of this bill forecast simply have not occurred. We deeply care about the equity of sports, and this is not the way to achieve it. This is simply just discrimination. Thank you so much.
Catherine Jennifer is recognized to speak. Next will be Tammy Fitzgerald.
Thank you. My name is Catherine Jennifer. I'm an attorney. Ironically, I became an attorney to protect my trans daughter, and the NCGA keeps fighting me on it. Last time I tried to come to you all as a parent of a trans kid, and that didn't work 2 years ago. Here we are again. HB2 estimated to cost us over 1,000 jobs and $77 million. Haven't we learned our lesson? The North Carolina High School Athletic Association already has an inclusive policy since 2019. It's working. Last time I heard about how, and even today, how unfair it is because of periods and chromosomes. But what about people that don't have periods? Biological women don't always have periods. We have Turner syndrome, PCOS. Have you ever heard of that people have other chromosome combinations, XXY, XXX, and so on? And yet here we are again. So let's look at some numbers. We have 1.7 million students in North Carolina. Last time we said there were maybe 10 playing sports. What if it's 20 this time? That's still 0.001% of our students. What if it's 100? That's still 0.006% of our students. Let's talk about some other numbers that I'd really like your committee to think about. There are over 22,000 homeless students in North Carolina. The unpaid meal debt in North Carolina as of December was $3.1 million. 1 in 5 children in North Carolina are hungry. Almost 25% of students in North Carolina live in poverty. This is not the issue we should be talking about. This is ridiculousness. And I want to end with a quote. You know, trans athletes have participated in sports since the 70s. There's no mass takeover of sports. It would have happened in 40 years if so. Thank you.
Kat Salami is called to be in the batter's box. Tammy Fitzgerald is recognized to speak.
Thank you, members of the committee. Tammy Fitzgerald from NC Values Coalition. Title IX was designed to stop discrimination and create equal athletic opportunities for women. Allowing males to compete in women's sports reverses nearly 50 years of advances for women and undermines the very intent of Title IX. We find this unacceptable, and we stand with the 72% of North Carolinians who believe that biological males should not be allowed to compete in women's sports. Science and common sense tells us that males have a physical advantage over females, and studies show this advantage is not mitigated by taking testosterone. The only fair solution is to ensure that only biological females compete in women's sports. Allowing males to compete effectively spells the end of women's sports. Now, I'm so glad that Senator Sawry cited the correct percentage of intersex individuals, 0.018, and that is the number, but this does not mean that the person is not identified as a male or a female. Nevertheless, appealing to these disorders to justify gender ideology is an intentional diversion. First, none of these conditions produces other sexes or genders. Second, gender ideology provides no new insight into these disorders. Third, people who identify as transgender or non-binary rarely have one of these disorders. And fourth, no such disorder corresponds to the growing list of gender identities. I want to take the case of Hannah Aronson. Hannah is an elite women's cyclist who just in the past month decided to leave the sport. That's because she kept getting beat by males. In her last race, she came in fourth, flanked on either side by male riders, awarded third and fifth places. My sister and my family sobbed as they watched a man finish in front of me, having witnessed several physical interactions with him throughout the race. She wrote, NC Values Coalition thanks Senators Corbin, Sawyer, and Krawiec for this bill, and we urge you to vote for women. Thank you.
Spencer Mason is called to the batter's box, and Kat Salemi, I apologize for mispronouncing your name, is recognized to speak.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to testify against SB 631. My name is Kat Salemi. My pronouns are they, them, and I currently live in Durham, North Carolina. I've actually lived in North Carolina my entire life. I'm also a licensed clinical mental health counselor and a national certified counselor. Most of my clients are members of the trans, non-binary, and gender expansive community. I also personally identify as queer and non-binary. For these reasons, I believe I am well qualified to speak on this topic. This law's clear purpose is not to protect or support women and girls, but instead to discriminate against trans girls and teens and exclude them from participating in sports. Laws like this send a clear message to trans people that we are not accepted, not wanted, and not welcome. I can tell you from personal experience that being accepted as your true self can be a life-changing experience. I have seen my trans clients slowly light up as they get to express who they really are. Conversely, I have spent hours and hours with those same clients talking about the fear of violence, discrimination, and hatred that they face. I wish I could tell them that if they came out, they would be loved and accepted for who they are. Bills like this prove that they have good reason to be afraid. This law and others like it, laws that exclude trans people and limit our ability to express our authentic selves, are very clearly in opposition to the values that we should hold dear as Americans: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. If you truly care about kids, senators, and you truly care about our country, I ask that you stand in opposition to this bill. Thank you very much.
Spencer Mason is called to the podium. I'm sorry, I'm informed that he's on the next, he's here to speak on the next bill. Thank you. So I want to go back to, is there anybody else here who wants to speak on this bill? We have one person, and we'll allow this one speaker, and then we need to move forward because we have to conclude this meeting at 10 sharp, and we still have one bill to hear.
Good afternoon, or morning rather. My name is Bishop Tanya Rawls. I am founder and executive director of the Freedom Center for Social Justice and a retired pastor as of December 31st of last year. I stand before you today in strong opposition to SB 631. I first want to say how very predictable this body is. I did not know how it would come, but you are right on schedule with your submission of this anti-trans bill. Every election cycle, members of this chamber attack the most vulnerable to build wedges and stir their political base. After the election cycle is over, miraculously, the supposed threats that they shout about are put away until the next election cycle. I was taught a very valuable lesson when arriving to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I live. In 1999, I came to an area that was struggling in reference to children that were in Center City being given a quality education. And I would stand and say, we all want all kids to have a quality education in safe, protected space. An older white gentleman came up to me, and his race was relevant because we were talking about some things connected to race. And he said, I really admire your energy around this issue, but at the end of the day, you're making a false assumption. The false assumption is we all want all children to be safe and protected. I will say that I want to close my remarks by stating that the words I have heard have been troubling, because as a black person, when science was given as the reason that we could not actually get education, when women, based on science, were also told we could not go to college because our brains weren't as large, at the end of the day, science is not the issue, politics are. And my hope is that you will vote like it's your child that we're talking about. Thank you.
All right, we're going to conclude our public comment and our discussion on there at this time, because we still have one bill. Just in summation, before I call for the vote, I want to make one comment myself as the mother of a young woman who participated in sports. She played basketball, she ran track, she was a member of a state championship winning track team. I think that we have to recognize that there is a crisis among girls in our society. Looking at the Washington Post, February 17th, 2023, there was a big article, The Crisis in American Girlhood, Stark Findings on the Pervasive Sadness, Suicidal Thoughts, and Sexual Violence Endured by Teen Girls Have Jolted Parents and the Wider Public. And I think that I commend Senator Sawyer and Senator Corbin and the other bill sponsors for bringing this bill forward, because I think Senator Marcus mentioned that the trans youth are struggling with their identity and their mental health. So are our young women in our culture. And Senator Chaudhary called for us to exercise mercy and compassion and recognize who is vulnerable. And I agree with that. And I look out and I see our young women are really needing our mercy and our compassion, and they feel very vulnerable too. And I know that for my daughter and for thousands like her, having fair competition where she has an equal chance to win is vital. And I will quibble with one thing that Senator Sawyer said. She mentioned that the young women will have to work twice as hard, or be twice as strong and work twice as hard. In too many instances, no matter how hard she works, no matter how hard she trains, no matter how hard she tries, because there is a biological difference, she will not ultimately be able to win against somebody who has had the benefit of natural testosterone coursing through their body. So with that being said, Senator Lazara has made a motion. His motion is for a favorable to the bill as amended, rolled into a proposed committee substitute, with a favorable report to the committee substitute and an unfavorable report to the original bill with a referral to rules. All in favor, please say aye. Anyone opposed? The ayes have it, and the bill will be referred back to rules. Next on our calendar is Senate Bill 411, Students in Homeschool Take PSAT/AP. Senator Newton is recognized to explain the bill, and I believe there's an amendment.
There is. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members. I'll be very brief. There is an amendment, but let me explain the bill, and the reason for the amendment will become apparent. So pre-pandemic, homeschoolers who were in high school could go to their local high school and take the PSAT or advanced placement tests. When the pandemic